Alright, so it's been a little while since I talked about beta, primarily because I got kind of demotivated and then had some lack of free time going. But I've been feeling it again, so I'm back. I want to show you guys some new changes that aren't really new because it's been that long, but then I want to talk about some criticism I have, and this criticism is based on my leveling to 115 and my raid testing. So, first off, talents. The talents have been rearranged again. I don't really remember where they were before, so I'm just going to show you all of them. We got Exposed Elements, Echo of the Elements, and Element of Blast on this row right here. I can tell you right now, the Echo of the Elements is definitely the best choice here right now. Exposed Elements, the Lightning Bolt following the Earth Shock does about as much damage as one Lava Burst, and that is significantly less frequent than the Lava Burst cooldown is, unless you get Aftershock procs. And Elemental Blast just doesn't really do enough damage right now to compete, in my opinion. That could be different because of the stats gained, but it doesn't really feel like it's doing a whole lot. And right now, there are no sims or anything, so it's all kind of based on feelings. We got Aftershock, Master of the Elements, and Totem Mastery. For me personally, I think Aftershock definitely is the best option here. Earthshock is a huge chunk of our damage, and Master of the Elements would probably be the best option if you were running Ice Fury, but Ice Fury is very undertuned right now. Specifically, Frost Shock kind of just doesn't really do anything. Totem Mastery, I believe this could be quite good on AoE, because Earthshock, or rather Earthquake, is quite bad. And Aftershock proccing on a bad spell wouldn't be terribly ideal. You would get a lot of Maelstrom refunded, but I do think Totem Mastery probably is the best for AoE, but Aftershock is definitely the best for single target from what I've seen. Totem Mastery could be good for single target, I'm just not aware of it. I haven't actually tested it much on single target, but who knows. It's all speculation. Unfortunately, Totem Mastery is still in the game. It is exactly the same as it is on live, so you do have to hit this button every 2 minutes. Oh, and I completely forgot to mention, Aftershock has been completely redone. It no longer refunds 20% or 30% of the Maelstrom spent on a spell. It has a 30% chance to refund all of the Maelstrom spent. It is basically like the legendary boots from Legion, but for every Maelstrom spender, and a 30% chance. So that's actually a very significant change that I can't believe I completely forgot to mention. This change, it kind of like, at first sight, it's like, oh no, more RNG, but when you're actually playing it, it does feel kind of nice to have a little bit of a change in the rotation every once in a while, because the rotation is quite predictable right now on beta. But at the same time, it is adding quite a bit of RNG, so I'm not really sure how I feel about this yet. I haven't fully decided on my thoughts. I'll update you guys on that later. Let me know what you guys think about this. Of course, I'm assuming a lot of the responses are going to be, oh no, RNG, because that's my original thought as well. But we'll see how that goes. If there's nothing else going on RNG-wise, it's probably fine to have one proc, you know. Next, you got Spirit Wolf, Earth Shield, and Static Charge. This is a nice little talent tier of utility abilities. This one will probably be the go-to at Mythic Plus. Earth Shield and Spirit Wolf are both kind of their own thing. Earth Shield heals for so little, I haven't really used it at all. Spirit Wolf I've been using for questing, because you can just kind of run extra fast. Static Charge I've been using for dungeons. 60 tier, you got High Voltage, Storm Elemental, and Liquid Magma Totem. All of these are very interesting. Right now, Liquid Magma Totem does very little damage, so it's not really very good. Storm Ellie does a lot of damage with Primal Elementalist, and if you use the Primal Elementalist version, you get this ability called Eye of the Storm. What this ability does is it does 0 nature damage to all enemies within 8 yards every 1 second-ish, and the damage of this ability is increased by 5% every time it deals damage, and of course the number isn't actually 0 damage. This thing on large pulls, it gets just absurd. On single target isn't actually, I don't think it's actually worth using, but Wind Gust hits pretty hard too. But on big pulls, every time this thing deals damage, I believe that counts for every mob it deals damage to as well. So on pulls of like 10, this thing is like my top damage. It's like 100k. So that's pretty good for AoE burst, which is kind of nice to have. High Voltage, it is actually bugged right now, unless this was fixed like today. But yesterday I tried this and it was bugged. Today being like Friday. Yesterday I tried this and it was bugged, where Chain Lightning overloads were actually, when the second overload procced on Chain Lightning, it gave a Lightning Bolt overload, which I gotta say, it looks hilarious, but it isn't very effective. So that's a thing to keep in mind. This could be really good with like a Lightning Bolt build. You got like Exposed Elements, Aftershock to get more Earth Shocks, High Voltage to get like beefy 3 times overloads on those big beefy or lightning bolts, unlimited power, or stormkeeper or something. I'm not really sure what else would go in there. Oh, probably a storm elemental and primal elementalist, and maybe stormkeeper for more lightning bolts. Something like that could be really interesting. But unlimited power is actually quite good. I'll get there in a minute though. So that's high voltage. I'll do some dungeon recordings and upload those for sure. Especially when I get to 120, I'll be doing mythic dungeons stuff all the time. And my plan right now is to get 120 sometime over this weekend. But moving on from that, we got Nature's Guardian. It's basically the current trait. I believe I already went over this last video. It's the current shamanistic healing trait, but at 35%. I want to clear up a kind of a rumor that we've been having that it acts as cheat death. It doesn't actually work as like a cheat death per se. It does exactly the same thing as shamanistic healing does for the most part, where like shamanistic healing, if you took over your health pool of damage, it would heal you before you actually technically took the damage, like 1 millisecond before the damage. So you can look at your death log. If you got one shot by something, you always had shamanistic healing in there, healing you before you actually died. What this does is it does heal you before you take the damage, but only if your health is already below 35% when you take the damage. So it doesn't actually proc when your health is brought below 35%, it procs when you take damage below 35%. So it's not very good for like actually one-shots. It's definitely not working as like a cheat death. It just heals. If you took, let's say, 40% of your maximum health in damage at 30% health, it would heal you for 10%, putting you at 45%, and you would live with 5%, or no, it would heal for 20%, putting you at 65%, 55%. Numbers are really hard. It would heal you, and you would live by whatever number. I don't know, it's 4 in the morning, I'm sorry. Ancestral Guidance, same as live, except for now it is on the global cooldown, which is a whole nother problem that I'll talk about in a little bit. You got Windrush Totem, same as live. Little utility talent. I really like Ancestral Guidance versus Windrush Totem. Nature's Guardian does seem to not really fit in here. Probably should be another something else. I don't know, maybe Static Charge, something. I guess I like Static Charge being on a separate row here, though. But it almost feels like if they switch these two, it would make more sense. But I don't want to say that for sure, because I really like having Ancestral Guidance in dungeons, and also want to have the better stun. So, you know, we'll just leave it as it is. 90 row, got Earth and Rage, same as live. Primal Elementalist. It does empower both of your different elementals. I already showed you the Storm Ellie one. If you just go to that for now. Fire Ellie one transforms into a molten meteor and charge at your target, dealing about 3,000 damage, and of course this is at level 115, to all targets within 10 yards, and then it goes back and does its normal thing. This actually does quite a bit of damage. It's a nice little burst. It's not nearly as much as Eye of the Storm, for the most part, but it is quite a big chunk of damage. So it's probably even worth using on single target, from what I've seen. Pretty good, pretty good. And then we got Ice Fury, which is just really undertuned. It deals 1,000 damage. That's like half of a lightning bolt, or half of a lava burst, because that's always a crit. And the Frost Shock is like 500 damage times 4,000%. It's like 2,000. It's just not very good. It's just not very good right now. Hopefully it gets buffed. Oh, wait, what? Not 400%. It's 60%. That's actually terrible. Okay, never mind. It's even worse than I thought. Definitely don't use Ice Fury on beta right now. That'll probably get a massive buff. What I'm hoping is they take Ice Fury and they make Frost Shock like actually really good, especially with the 60% damage increase. They have a lot of room to make Frost Shock very good. So I'm kind of hoping right now that Frost Shock becomes like our movement filler, because with Earth Shock costing a solid 60 Maelstrom, a lot of the time I find myself running and I just have nothing to hit. With Flame Shock being on cooldown, I don't have enough Maelstrom for Earth Shock. I don't have any buttons that I can hit that'll actually do anything, and Frost Shock right now just flat out is not worth wasting the Maelstrom on. So I'm hoping they can make like Maelstrom points, or like damage per Maelstrom spent. I'm hoping Frost Shock is actually above Earth Shock. So if you have like a lot of movement coming up or something, you'd actually want to save Maelstrom for Frost Shock. But it wouldn't be worth it when you're standing still because of the global. So that could be really interesting gameplay kind of choices that you got going on there. So I'm kind of hoping that's the direction they go with this. That would make the spec a lot more engaging, I think. But 100 talent row, you got unlimited power. I believe this is new. I don't think this was here last time. When your spells cause an elemental overload, you gain 2% haste for 10 seconds. Getting a stack does not refresh the duration. Now that I remember, this was here last time. But I have learned from testing dungeons, I believe this is very, very good. So, of course, like I said earlier, we can't sim or anything, so I can't say for certain. But from what I've seen, this appears to be very, very good, especially for AoE. This could also be mostly because our haste levels are quite low right now. But this is a pretty fun talent. It seems like just a nice little passive, but it is quite noticeable when you eat a lot of overloads. It can feel pretty good. So next you got Stormkeeper. It's like live Stormkeeper, but much weaker and only 2 charges. No longer castable while moving. And Stormkeeper is honestly a really big disappointment right now, especially with the nerfed Maelstrom generation. It's like you use the button and then you use it on 5 targets and you still can't Earthquake. It's pretty sad. And it doesn't really do that much damage. It's just kind of... It could be used if you really need burst AoE. Like there's a certain dungeon boss in beta right now that spawns like 5 targets and they need to die very quickly. You could probably use Stormkeeper there. But Stormkeeper overall, pretty disappointed with it right now. And Ascendance is decent because Lava Burst just does so much damage. But at the same time, I think Unlimited Power is definitely better, even for single target. I have tried them both in raid testing, and Unlimited Power netted me much better results. Of course, Ascendance is more bursty, but Ascendance, you have to stand still the whole time, of course, and your Maelstrom generation is quite weak. Even if you're spamming Lava Burst the whole time, that's 8 Maelstrom per cast. Each cast is like 1.5 seconds at best, probably like 1.8 actually. So it is a bit slow. It's slow compared to live. It's just not, it doesn't seem like it's quite that amazing, especially not in dungeons. Unlimited Power is really good for AoE and single target. So for dungeons in particular, it's very, very good. So now that we've kind of discussed what's potentially changed, I don't remember exactly how the last build was, but now that we discussed like the new talent layout and everything and what the talents kind of do, I want to kind of discuss the playstyle. While I'm not actually 120 yet, this character does have 15 hours of playtime, and a good 4 hours of that is in raids, and probably another 2.5, 3 hours of that is in dungeons, and the rest is questing. Pretty much none of it's AFK, except for right now. I'm probably considered AFK right now. But actually, almost every hour of this level is in raid, so yeah, about 4 hours probably. And it's basically the playstyle. For single target, it feels pretty good, excluding the haste issue. Because let me mention one thing in Battle for Azeroth is at max level, they seem to be really working on secondary stats. I always say scats. Secondary stats scaling out of control. And the downside of this is that, like right now at 115 with like basic leveling gear, I have 12% haste. With this same gear on in dungeons or in raids where I'm scaled up to 120 and I'm scaled up to like what is supposed to be eye level ready to go into heroic rating, I had 8% haste. And it felt so slow. Like ridiculously slow. My stat percentages were all lower than when I'm 115. And I'm supposedly in normal rating gear. So that is making the spec feel so much worse than it probably will. So right now, like, this is the build I was running, and to the most success in the single target raids. And the rotation actually did feel pretty smooth. It felt like it flowed pretty well outside of the slow generation and the slow casting. The only complaints I have were just being slow for single target. For AoE, it's just like, it's the kind of slowness that haste won't really help that much. Chain Lightning just generates so little that you're always casting like 4 to 6 Chain Lightnings before casting anything else. And with Flame Shock having a cooldown and everything, you're just kind of doing, it feels like you aren't really doing anything. You're just kind of hitting the same button over and over again. So just to recap a little bit, single target feels pretty good, especially during heroism, because they have all the haste. AoE feels really slow, and my suggestion is the need to add at least one other thing for AoE to like make it a little more interesting, or they just need to flat out buff the Maelstrom generation by at least like double. Because not only are we losing half of our generation, we need to gain 25 more Maelstrom to use any AoE spenders. So this creates kind of a problem. It feels incredibly slow. So I've just been kind of like coming up with these random ideas, and I don't know if this one's any good or not. I haven't put enough thought into it to like come up with any downsides. But something I was thinking about is, what if your Chain Lightning applied a debuff to the target, your main target, that made Earthquake deal more damage to it. So your goal was to, similar to Windwalker Monk, but not quite the same, your goal was to apply the debuff to as many targets as possible while doing your other stuff as well. It would just give you something else to think about. The only downside would be you'd have a longer ramp-up time, probably. But the damage increase doesn't have to be very much. It just has to be irrelevant enough that you actually attempt to do it. There's something to make it a little more, or a little less monotonous. And then, of course, I do think that buffing Chain Lightning Generation is kind of just a must at this point. It's just too low. You're just casting the same ability so many times in a row before you get to do anything with it. The ramp-up time is huge. I just think it's too low. That's just my only opinion on that is just they need to buff it, or I'm going to be unhappy no matter what else they really do, unless they just nerf Earthquake costs. We just need to have a much more balanced Earthquake to Chain Lightning cast ratio, because right now it's like 6-to-1. But that's kind of my thoughts on how the rotation flows. So the last LA specific thing I want to talk about is damage. And I do want to say before talking about this, there's a lot of time for them to tune things, and they've only just begun tuning things for damage. But I do want to say that LE damage is very, very bad on beta right now. Our AoE, subpar, our single target is like bottom of the barrel. Our ability to damage while moving is like non-existent. And my biggest concern with this is not that our damage is actually low right now. It's that some of our damage issues are more fundamental issues, such as our inability to DPS while moving. Like I was giving you the scenario earlier, where one of the beta testing bosses knocks you back, and you have to run for like a couple seconds to get back into position. And during those couple seconds, maybe you can refresh Flame Shock, but there's usually an ad that spawns around that time that I had to Flame Shock, so I didn't even have Flame Shock off cooldown. Maybe I can Earth Shock. Maybe, but I usually pooled for the ad and Earth Shocked the ad, so I didn't tend to have much Maelstrom. And then, so what else do I have to do? Nothing. I just gotta run back, unless I get like a Lava Surge proc, but that's kind of, it's just like, that seemed like it was way too frequent. Like, that scenario happened a lot. I was just kind of running, and I wasn't able to do anything while moving. And that's where it's not just damage numbers that have to go up, it's specific damage sources, that being Ice Fury, Frost Shock, or they need to do something else, maybe like, I know this suggestion comes up all the time and Blizzard's probably so tired of hearing it, but Spirit Walker's Grace would be pretty nice. Something along those lines. A lot of people would want Lightning Bolt while moving back. Not personally my preference, but it would definitely make it feel a little better right now. There's something for the movement, because our damage right now is quite bad, but even if they tune it up, I feel like even if we're really good at turreting, like the best in the game, at just standing there and doing damage, we're going to end up in a situation like Demo Warlock is on live, where we sim really good. We do really good damage in like normal or something where we don't have to move, but the last few bosses on Mythic are almost always heavy movement. You almost always have to move quite a bit on those bosses, because how else do you make engaging mechanics that you don't have to move on? They kind of have to make you move. So if your class specializes in standing still and doing lots of damage while not moving, but really sucks at doing anything while moving, you're almost always going to struggle. So that's just kind of my thoughts on the direction LA needs to go and where it's at right now. Try not to panic too much about the damage, but I'm definitely suggesting to Blizzard right now, if anyone from there is listening, that make Frost Shock more damage per Maelstrom spent than Earth Shock, but not so much that it's actually worth using over Earth Shock when standing still. This would add quite a few things. I already mentioned this once, but I want to reiterate. This would add complexity to the spec. You get to think ahead, get to choose when you have to move, and even if you don't plan ahead, you can use alt moving and actually do some damage. It won't be a whole lot of damage if you don't have a whole lot of Maelstrom, but there will be some damage there, and it's not going to feel quite as bad when you have an ability to use. So that's my quick thoughts on elemental damage and where it needs to go. Lastly, I want to talk specifically about the GCD change and how it affects LA Shaman. I've already made my one video talking about how much I don't like the GCD change. In my opinion on that, hasn't really changed. They did do an interview talking about the GCD change and kind of defending it, but their defense for their whole offensive CD thing did make some sense, and if they follow what I suggested and also what they kind of brought up, where they make offensive CDs feel influential to hit, more so like in the initial GCD, I have no issue with it, none. But immediately after that interview, like within 2 days, they added racials to the GCD, like work control racial, and these racials are just stat increases, and that is the exact opposite of what they were trying to suggest. And that's also after the interview in which they specifically stated they were done adding things to the GCD, and if anything, they'd be taking things off of it. My assumption here is that they already had this change in on their internal builds and just kind of didn't think about it. But still, it just kind of like, it feels like a principle thing. They just said that they just said that the abilities being empty GCDs don't feel super good and makes their rotation a little bit slower. And then they go ahead and put racials on it, and now my opener looks like, yeah, I could go Ascendance to like really make this bad, but let's just do an opener real quick with Ascendance. You can plus or minus a global there. So what I've been doing is I've been precasting Berserking. Gotta wait. Stormelly, gotta wait. Boom. It's 4 globals, which is, without haste, that's quite a bit of time. That's like 6 seconds. You gotta Berserking. I precast Berserking because 1, it doesn't pull anything. 2, it's probably my least influential CD. And 3, the haste actually decreases my following CDs. So I Berserking, Stormelly, because Stormelly will start damaging on its own. And then I cast Ascendance. And then I cast Hero, because I have to Lust into the fight. I might cast Lust before my other cooldowns, because that would also reduce the GCDs. Kind of depends on when you need to Lust that fight. But either way, that's still 4 GCDs that don't do anything. They do nothing on their own. And that doesn't feel very good for me. There's some of you guys didn't. Some of you guys in the last video mentioned that you guys didn't really care. That's your opinion. You're entitled. You're entirely entitled to your opinion, and I'm glad you guys don't care, because it does seem to be like it's here to stay. So you guys aren't gonna. It's not gonna bother you that much. For me, it's gonna bother me a lot, and I can live with my cooldowns being on it somewhat, but Bloodlust. That's a raid CD that you have to use. That only increases haste for you and everyone else. Why is that in the GCD? That one seems like the most questionable one. That one's definitely the one I'm the most annoyed about right now. And I'm sincerely hoping that goes away, because there's already a mana cost on it. You're already making it so DPS basically have to do it on any hard content, because the healers can't like spare the mana. So you're basically forcing a hunter to do it, because it goes in their hunter pet GCD. But anyways, I've been kind of ranting on for a long time. That's my thoughts, and I'll try to do more videos soon, specifically like max level beta gameplay. I've kind of been into that lately. I'll get max level relatively soon. But anyways, guys, thanks for watching. Sorry for making this video like extra long, I guess. I don't know how long it's going to be, but it feels like I've been talking for a very long time. I just had a lot of things I wanted to catch up on, and felt like it wasn't really worth making like 10 different videos for it, because by the time I finished producing all of them, it would have changed enough that they weren't even relevant anymore. So I'm just going to put them all in one video and then try and just keep up on top of things a little more in the future. So again, guys, thanks for watching. Hopefully you guys enjoyed, and I will see you guys in the next one.